Welcome to the first episode of a new series I'm doing on my YouTube channel called Nostalgic Games. Before I get into this series, I will tell you that we have a podcast called Gaming Dudes Podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast and all the other kind of platforms. So if you want to hear more general gaming topics, I'd go there. But if you're solely into nostalgia, which is a huge part of like why I even like games in the first place, and I still play these games to this day, then you're in the right place. If you read the title, we're going to talk about Spider-Man 3 for the PS2, which was a game I thoroughly enjoy and still enjoy to this day. I say the first talking point I'm going to go into is the one that I usually don't care about that much, which is the graphics. But I'll just do it to get it out of the way. They're not terrible, and a lot of people seem to really not like them. I kind of like them in some way because a lot of Spider-Man games are pretty bland when it comes to the seasons they kind of portray. Usually you get like summer or spring kind of feel, or if you're playing Miles Morales, it's winter. But I didn't play that game, so it doesn't really change anything. But what's cool about this one is you kind of get dead trees and kind of dead grass. And to me, it just kind of gave me a fall kind of feel. Same with the sky. It wasn't as extremely colorful, which I prefer. I think it just looks kind of cool. And I wish more games, specifically Spider-Man, would have more varied seasons. And I feel like this game probably unintentionally gave off that kind of feel to it. We've also got the character models, which range from okay looking to absolutely terrible. Specifically, any human character looks really bad. Like, and by that I mean anyone who's not in a costume. You can barely see their eyes, even if they have them. I can't really tell. Maybe if I was running it with some kind of like HD, high resolution texture hack or something for emulation, it would look better. But without it, though, it looks very basic. The textures are kind of flat, but I think Spider-Man transitioned well. I think he looks as good as he did in Spider-Man 2, if not better because he's not so skinny. And I think Black Suit Spider-Man also looks really good, especially for a PS2 game. I think that's really the only part where they put that much time into it, and I'm happy he at least looks good. Everybody else, pretty bad. Venom's alright. I mean, he looks pretty decent. It's, like, not bad. The city itself looks pretty bad, if I'm going to be honest. It honestly was a major step down from Spider-Man 2 texture-wise. Like, the buildings, they're serviceable. They're not bad, but they just do not, like, I don't even think many of them have reflections, and you couldn't see through them, which was a cool part about Spider-Man 2 that gave it a more realistic feel. And I don't think it's bad by any means. I kind of like the more muted colors of the game, like I said. I don't know, it kind of fits the mood of the whole Black Suit storyline. I also thoroughly enjoyed the sky box kind of thing. It wasn't as colorful or as vibrant looking. I bring that up a lot, but it just kind of adds to the atmosphere. Sometimes it's green or it's overcast, or it gives off a very dark feel that fits the tone of the story to me. And the cutscenes they added are very bad looking, and some people would say they're better looking than the PS3 version. I do not agree with that. The faces may look a little better, but the lighting and the compression and just the way it looks is just very bad. Like, very choppy. I enjoy watching them, and some aspects do look better, but most of it to me looks worse, and they definitely could have done a better job, especially when looking at Ultimate Spider-Man. I mean, the cutscenes in that game look much better, and that's because it has an art style, but you probably should have taken that approach to these games too. Maybe give it a cell shaded look. I'm not saying you have to go full on with that, but I feel like it would make it more unique looking because every time a game looks realistic, a lot of times they just don't age well, at least back in the day. Not anymore, but that's how it used to be, at least. Now, let's talk about the voice acting. And you know me, I'm a sucker for this aspect of any project. I enjoy voice acting. I think good voice acting can really just make a game or a show that's animated so much better. And if you don't get it right, it ruins everything to me. It really destroys a good story if you don't have good voice actors. I don't care how good your writing is. But we've got Tobey Maguire and the rest of the cast. Some people replaced, like Betty Brant. Don't know her voice. Not going to look it up. Also, Dr. Connor's voice, who I personally enjoy. Nathan Carlson, that's his name. I think he's hands down one of the best voices for Dr. Connors. He gives a great performance, and I'm glad that they didn't get the movie person to do his voice. I think Betty Brant was okay, but she just didn't really sound that great. She didn't really do well at impersonating her version of the character. And I'm not going to talk about MJ. I liked her impersonator because she sounded like the actual actress, but I don't care about Mary Jane. But back to Dr. Connors. He kind of fit that wise mentor type character. Something about his voice just gave off this kind mentor like character who's always there to help and do the right thing. And that's the core of Dr. Connor's character, a very kind man who's willing to help people in need, and they really just nailed that. But Tobey Maguire did amazing in this game. I think he did better in this than Spider-Man 2, and I've seen reviewers say he's more dull in this or doesn't sound as interested. I highly disagree. I think this is the height of his voice acting career for Spider-Man. He sounds actually like super interested in everything that's going on. And when I re-listened to Spider-Man 2, like his lines are great in that. There's some great ones, but he sounds kind of bored or sleepy in that in comparison to this game. In this one, it feels like they really just kind of let him do what he wanted. Same with the 360 version, but that one's a little more spotty sometimes, but he still does great. Like, I'm not trying to bash him. I think Toby nails it. Like 90% of the time he plays the character in any form, voice-wise, in video games. He always just kind of gives it his all. Because in the movies, they never really gave him an opportunity to goof around. Like, there were some jokes he said, but not as much as in the games, which I really enjoy. I think they really show that Toby could be an even better Spider-Man under different direction, in my opinion at least. Topher Grace is somehow even worse as Venom and Eddie Brock in this game than in the movie, which I didn't think was possible. This guy sucked so bad in the movies and just played the worst version of Eddie Brock, who's just a scum bag, just some wimp. And he's just annoying. Such a bad version of the character. Rather than being just this kind of jock character who's a jerk, but he kind of gets redeemed. He just kind of stays annoying in this and constantly gets in the way of Peter. Just such a bad character. Somehow, his Venom voice is even worse in this. They threw way too many effects on his voice, at least in the 360 version. He sounds so bad in that. You can barely understand what he's saying. He kind of sounds like a derpy old man who is gargling marbles. I'm not kidding. Or a gremlin. It's that bad. The other one is just like in the voice in the PS2 version is different. Like it's still Topher but with different effects, and it sounds better, more like the show, the animated series version of the voice filter, which I think is personally my favorite version of that. He sounds more alien-like, but the problem is it's still Topher Grace, and Venom has a squeaky voice, and his voice cracks in some of the voice lines, which really brings down the intimidation factor when he sounds like a prepubescent teenager. So, really bad. Venom just, as always, for Spider-Man 3, they never get him right, even in the games. J.K. Simmons is J. Jonah. They finally got him back. And no, I'm not counting the PSP Spider-Man 2 as him being back as Jonah, because this is an actual console experience, and this is the original. Like, it's not the original game, but it's much closer than what the PS2 version, PSP version of Spider-Man 2 was to the PS2 one. This is way more accurate. That didn't even have open world in it, that Spider-Man 2 one. He does amazing in this, like, as always. I've never heard him do bad. He even does great in the 360 version. Then we have James Franco. And the guy's great as Harry Osborn, but in the games, he sucks. He sucks in Xbox 360. He sucks in the PS2. He's so emotionless. He literally at times sounds like this. They probably made him read lines off of a cue card. That's how bad he sounded. And the saddest part is they finally got him for a game after not having him and having Josh Keaton from Spectacular Spider-Man, who played Spider-Man in that series, play Harry, which is the weirdest thing. Regardless, I'd say we're done with the voice acting. Though I will say, one final note on that, again, is Shriek and Morbius do amazing. Courtney Taylor is Shriek, and whoever they got as Morbius, I don't know his name. I could Google it like I said, but not gonna do it. Maybe next episode I'll do more research on that kind of stuff, but not now. But that's the voice acting out of the way. Now let's talk about the web swinging. I'm going to do this out of order from my notes because I think this one's a little bit of a shorter segment for this. The web swinging is pretty good. It's fast and it controls pretty well. I don't think it's the best in the series. My favorite would probably be Spider-Man 2 and the console, 360 version of Spider-Man 3. I think those are the golden standard along with Web of Shadows. Those are the best versions of the web swinging. They're very smooth, fluid. There's air tricks. The speed is insane. You can go like across the entire New York map super quickly. It looks cool, feels great, just amazing web swinging in those games. But in this one, it's slower unless you do the boost, which is a lot more tedious to do because at the end of your swing, you have to push the X button and jump to boost, which is kind of weird, but once you get used to it, it's pretty quick, just not as fast. I enjoy this though. I don't think it's bad. It's fun to use, which is great, so good on the swinging. Though I will say web zipping is somehow slower than swing boosting, which usually in the newer games that's not the case, so it's kind of weird that it's slower, but I guess that's how it works. If we're going to talk about web swinging, we also have to talk about wall crawling, and that's kind of the worst part of this game. If you don't web zip or wall run while wall crawling, then you're basically super slow, and it's super embarrassing. It kind of reminds me of Spider-Man PS4, and I brought that up in one of my live streams when I was playing the game. But I'll say one thing: it's still enjoyable. I like the traversal systems. I think they are still fun to use, minus the wall crawling, which, like I said, super terrible. Now I want to talk about the black and red suit dynamics. I think this is the strongest part of the game, and it was super innovative for its time, and I honestly still think it's better than Web of Shadows black suit mechanics. Not in terms of combat, I think they're pretty even there for me, but the aspect where you have to use a quick time event to fight the suit. So you have to repeatedly hit a sequence of buttons, and the suit starts screaming, like with this high pitched alien sounding shriek, and it just really makes you feel like you're fighting it. The quick time event button sequence gets longer and longer as the suit starts to take over, and it's just, you can hear the suit scream even more, and then it slams the ground with its fist if you fail the quick time event, and you leap back up. It's super cool and shows the aggressive power the suit has over Spider-Man. And that's, no game has matched this since with that kind of dynamic, in my opinion at least. If you beat up enough guys and fill up your special meter, then your combos become even more deadly and pretty much instant kill any enemy you fight or come very close to doing it. It doesn't break boss fights, but it does make them a bit easier, and it's such an awesome dynamic. It's kind of funner to use than the rage mode in the 360 version. I enjoy that animation wise more, but the dynamics of the combat in this are so much better in that area because you're not just smacking enemies until the bar fills up and it just takes forever and you have to tap the stupid button. It's bad in the console version in comparison. In this, you just dominate. Enemies stand no chance against you. It's amazing. And if you don't take the suit off after your timer runs out in rage mode, you get a game over, which is really cool because it limits the black suit, and I'd be okay without that mechanic and just, you know, I understand why they have it. You gotta limit it, and it's just a little bit overpowered if you can just one hit kill most of the minor enemies and do significant amounts of damage more than with the red suit to even bosses. So I get why they have it. The combat itself is a lot like Spider-Man 2, but it's kind of like an improved version of it in my eyes because the combos are a lot smoother to me to perform. I think the punches being a little less, you know, free flowing makes it better because you can sometimes miss punches in Spider-Man 2, at least from my perspective. It feels like it locks on to the enemy in this game with combos specifically, and I really enjoy that. Plus, they're super easy to pull off. Something about them feels way smoother, and pulling them off just for some reason feels more satisfying too. They're more brutal, they're quicker, there's web combos, different kind of combat upgrades, which I don't care much about the upgrades because the black suit pretty much fills the role of all of those. And you can really only upgrade the red suit, but I personally think the combat is super fun. The red suit's super quick, fast, you punch super fast. You don't hit that hard unless you do a combo or at least a finisher, the finishing part of the combo, but with the black suit, however, that's a different story. Every hit is super hard. It's slower, but you feel like you're really punching these guys super hard. You can send them flying, and it's super cool. You're so powerful with the black suit. And then there's the move which Web of Shadows also stole, which is where you jump into the air and kind of web zip to the enemy. Web strike. That's what they call it in Web of Shadows. it pretty much came from this game, and I think it's better here because you instantly zip to the enemy without having to time the button press when you get towards them. Like when you're right on them, you have to hit the Y button again or whatever triangle button just to leap off of the enemy and go to the next web strike attack. And this is from the air. And I just feel like it just is way easier to pull off in this game, and it's kind of the game breaking move. And there's another version you can do with the black suit where you leap off, you go onto them, leap off of them, and can just combo them while they're dazed or they fly to the ground. And that's a really cool aspect. I never really thought this when I first played the game. Like as a kid, I thought the PS3 version's combat was better, but the combat in this game is way better for Spider-Man 3 on PS2 than the PS3 version. It's kind of clunky on the PS3 version. It's good. I enjoy it, but it feels odd. And the dodging mechanics are better in this too because you don't have to use spider sense and wait for the meter to fill back up just to dodge. But that's honestly my opinion of the combat. It's solid, moves fast, hits hard, feels smooth, incorporates webs perfectly. The web rodeo attack is super solid. Just amazing combat to me. I think it's amazing. I think it's better than Spider-Man PS4's combat, in my opinion at least. Last thing I'll say about the combat is the fact that the dodging move is much less clunky than the PS3 version, because when you're doing the dodge in the PS3 version, you can block attacks and do a counter attack, but what's nice is when you're going on top of the guy, when you're flipping over him in this game and dodging him, you can hit him while you're above him twice or like 3 times. In the other one, you just hit him once and then just do a regular combo. In this, you kind of get those invincibility frames from the dodge so you don't get damaged and you can hit him while he's being dodged. Another thing they do that's nice is the limiting of guns and bullet sponge enemies. And bullet sponge enemies are enemies you just have to hit so many times. And they just tank hits. So you just punch them and punch them and punch them and just there's barely any health coming off of them. It's terrible. Happens a lot in Bethesda games, even though I love them. But so many enemies can just tank hits over and over again. And the nice part about there not being bullet enemies, or at least not many guns, is the fact that the dodging is finicky still in the PS3 version. And if your meter runs out for your spider sense, you're basically dead to gun enemies. They can kill you so quickly. Let's talk about side missions. Now, they're definitely less important than in Spider-Man 2, and much less enjoyable in some aspects. Because the thing about Spider-Man 2 is the side missions were kind of a double-edged sword. Because some of them were super annoying. Like the boat rescue mission where you have to jump across a boat in a river you can't swim in just to freaking save a couple guys. And if you fell once with the person you're carrying off the burning boat, the mission fails. And it's awful. Because there's this huge gap you have to jump with. And you can't web swing from anything if there's no buildings. It's just badly designed. Those missions are so boring and just horribly done. Like, terrible. I really don't enjoy them. But with this, they kind of cut the crap out. They're more simplistic in this game, mission-wise. There's not as much variety. Usually you're finding informants or looking for stuff that NPCs have dropped, finding them from enemies like evidence or something for a quest, a side quest, and then you have to give that evidence to the police. It's pretty basic. Or defend civilians, or pick up cars and kind of save people from burning cars that have flipped over on them. All really basic stuff. I think it's better than Spider-Man 2 in the way that it's not as repetitive, but I think it's worse in the way that the design of these missions aren't as like interesting. And they also cut the pizza missions from Spider-Man 2, which is just stupid. The fact that those awesome missions where you could deliver pizza for Mr. Aziz were cut from the games, like since then, is just super bad because they were kind of a fun thing to do to get some free hero points to upgrade your moves. And, it's Spider Man delivering pizza, just like the movies. Like, what is better than that? And rather than that, you get a fruitcake delivery thing where all you do is pick up the fruitcake. It's not like the pizza mission where you can mess up if you jump too high or web swing too fast. The problem is all you're doing is picking it up, webbing to the guy, and then just giving it to him. There's no conflict at all, at least from what I remember. I could be remembering it wrong, but it's very basic, strips down what was an interesting concept. Plus, there's no Daily Bugle photo missions, even though they give you a camera function, which those were at least in Spider-Man 2 in some capacity. And Spider-Man 3, the console version, to its credit, 360, like the quote-unquote next gen of that era of consoles, at least had photo missions. And they also were completely different. They had different voice acting for each photo mission, different scenarios, and sometimes you'd play as Peter Parker. Like, those were amazing. And the fact that these weren't included in the game, just at least in the PS2 version, is really, really stupid. You also can't even go in the Daily Bugle. You only see it in really crappy cutscenes. And that just makes no sense to me. What was super cool about Spider-Man 3 for Xbox 360 and Spider-Man 2 for PS2 and the other consoles is the fact that you could go into the Daily Bugle. Sure, there was nothing you'd really do there, but you could at least like chat up Betty or Robbie and kind of see what they're doing, or in the case of Spider-Man 3 for 360, get photo missions from there. And they really had an opportunity with this kind of lesser budget and graphics engine to kind of pump out the missions and make them more unique. But I don't know. That's just kind of how it goes sometimes with game development, unfortunately. Now let's talk about the story. So, Spider-Man 3 as a movie, I'm not going to talk about it that long. I enjoy it. It's nostalgic. Are there problems with it, like dancing emo Peter? Yeah. Are there problems with it and how they executed the black suit as a whole? Yes. Does it look cool? Were there great action scenes in the movie? 100%. Those are the best parts of the movie. The CG is amazing. But the game kind of skipped a lot of those problems with the relationship drama with Mary Jane, which I cared very little for. If you've heard me on the podcast or on my live streams, I don't care about that relationship. I'd rather have Peter Parker end up with Black Cat or Gwen Stacy. But regardless of that, it skips so many of the complaints I had with that movie. You're Spider-Man for pretty much the entirety of the game. And it kind of starts out in this warehouse. And, you learn about the Mad Bomber. And he's like a terrorist who's jealous of J. Jonah Jameson for him ruining him in a news story because he was going to do something, like bomb something. I don't necessarily remember. And then his boss fight's pretty cool. First you have to disarm bombs on the buildings and stuff in the first mission. And then in the second one, you find an informant to see what the H-bombers are doing. They call them the H-bombers. And after that, you have to face off with Luke Carlisle, the Mad Bomber, who's an original character. I had no idea he was. and you have to save J. Jonah Jameson from him. And that's what's interesting about it. Like, J. Jonah's a major part of the story, which in the other games, he was just some side character who was there for just kind of comedy's sake. And this one, you're actually saving him from a villain, which they never even did in the movies. It almost kind of felt like it should have been in Spider-Man 3 because it ends off the arc of J. Jonah Jameson in a way that's pretty satisfying. Like, it kind of closes his character arc. Doesn't mean he's out of the story, but at the end of it, so at the beginning they strap a electric necktie to J. Jonah Jameson and basically are gonna kill him. And if the electric necktie thing gets far away from the chopper that you're following, he blows up. But it kind of adds an interesting conflict. So you defeat Luke Carlisle, and J. Jonah Jameson actually thanks Spider-Man for saving him. And that just kind of closes the arc up. And Toby says, "You're welcome," as Spider-Man. It's just such a good scene. Like, so good. And it should have been in the movie. It would have enhanced it, like, hands down. The whole Dr. Kurt Connors lizard story is actually extremely well done in here. Specifically the second mission, where you're kind of discovering that Dr. Connors has turned into the lizard. Peter Parker shows up as Spider-Man in this cutscene, and in the 360 version, he shows up as Peter Parker, which makes no sense. Because with the Spider-Man one, if Dr. Connors sees him as Peter Parker, then, he's probably going to be like, "Dude, why are you here? It's dangerous." What's cool about him being Spider-Man is that, he's investigating this. He knows something's wrong. So obviously he's not going to show up as Peter Parker, or he might expose his identity. But the mission kind of has a cool nighttime atmosphere, and Dr. Connors is actually threatening people, and he's like almost kills many people that you have to save, from falling off a roof, from being crushed by cars. It's super cool. Amazing. And it has an actual there's tension to this, unlike the other one, which is more eerie in the 360 version, but it just doesn't hit that same feel to it in the way that the lizard is much more threatening, and we actually get to see him in this at the beginning. We don't just see him jump into the sewers, we see him do that after. And I think that's a way better introduction than him just immediately going to the sewers, and then you have to go down in there with him and fight his henchmen and go through the caves for like an hour, and then finally see him pop out and jump scare you, which was good, but it's, the pacing was just way off. This one is so much faster. And what's nice is they kind of tie Kraven in immediately to this story, because Kraven the Hunter's in this. And he's, looking to kill the lizard. It's his next hunt because he's obsessed with the glory of the hunt. And Spider-Man doesn't want him to kill him because it's Dr. Connors. He cares about him a ton. You really see that when he gets mad at Kraven for attacking him. And Spider-Man defeats the lizard beforehand, and then he escapes, and then Kraven's gang kind of gets involved and starts attacking the lizard and his henchmen, and then Spider-Man has to deal with him and take him out. And then Dr. Connors gets stabbed in this, which is way more tragic than the 360 version, where he just disappears after Kraven's girlfriend just kind of messes with him with her weird magic powers. Like, she was pointless in that entire thing. Calypso, I don't know much about her, but she just served no purpose in that, and then disappears completely with no explanation. In this, though, it makes way more sense. Kind of works for Peter's black suit arc. If you're wearing that, he gets very upset with Kraven for, stabbing a person who's kind of like a father figure to him, or mentor. So Spider-Man beats up Kraven in a super cool boss fight. All the boss fights in this game are really good, better than the 360 version. And this is me finally admitting that, because when I was younger, I would have never thought that. A couple years ago, I would have said this is infinitely worse, but it is kind of better, to me at least. Then we hit Shriek and Morbius. And this was the best part of the game. Seeing Morbius the vampire in a video game for the first time, because I saw him in the animated series of Spider-Man, and he was a terrible character in that. And I heard the movie that they released with him as the main character is really bad. I may see it someday, probably not if it's that terrible. But I just really think that Morbius is such an interesting concept, like a vampire in the Marvel Universe that just is an enemy of Spider-Man. And vampires are just kind of cool to me. They've always been cool. I enjoy Dracula and all that stuff, so this character is perfect, for me at least. And the way they introduce him is really cool. You're actually on a photo mission for Jonah looking for him. Or at least you think it's a photo mission, but Peter takes a snapshot of him in the cutscene, which kind of diffuses the purpose of that. It would have been cool to kind of sneak up on him, take a picture of him, and then fight him, but nope. And we kind of chase him around as he's making mischief around the city. We got to follow him and make sure he doesn't get away after we spot him on Peter Parker's college campus at ESU, which was a pretty cool reference to the comics. And then we go through a super awesome boss fight. And the music in this game, I didn't bring that up, but it's some of the best music I've heard in a video game, period. The boss fight soundtrack is just perfect. If you have time, listen to it on YouTube. The Spider-Man PS2 boss fight theme for Spider-Man 3. Amazing music. Better than the movies in a lot of instances. And the fight is just enhanced with that. Plus you have to outlast him until the sun comes up, because you can't damage a vampire at night, which makes perfect sense. You have to kind of catch him in your web as he's flying, and he doesn't turn into a bat when he's flying. He just gets a weird purple gas around him. But it's such a fun boss fight where you have to think on your toes and kind of outlast him, and then you kind of beat the crap out of him and just kind of take him to Doc Connors afterwards once you've defeated him during the daylight after a really weird QuickTime event that just kind of flies by real quick. Afterwards, you have to find Morbius's wife, Shriek, and this mission's pretty cool. She mind controls a bunch of people, but not before we have to do some dumb mission where her, aka Kraven's gang, somehow she takes them up, I guess. Maybe they needed a new leader. After Kraven's gang joins her, you have to find her informant, which is a really boring mission, and they don't tell you when you're going to find him or how. You just have to complete crime missions until you get lucky, and it's pretty badly designed there. But thankfully, once we get to the Shriek mission, everything changes for the better. People are getting mind controlled in the city. Shriek is causing chaos. There's burned cars. The sky's dark and kind of green and moody. It's really amazing. And then you have to save the people from almost dying from a gas leak because they're walking towards it, because she mind controls them to walk towards it. And then you have to climb the building after dealing with her henchmen and take out her little obelisk by pulling the symbiote meteorites off with your web. Super cool. And then once you defeat her, she retreats, and then you go back to Morbius because you're out of time and he could die. He has to get to Shriek, his wife, or he dies, because her powers came from the very same meteorite that had Spider-Man's symbiote in it, which I think is a really cool connection in my opinion. And just really kind of ties everything together and explains why she gets random powers. So Spidey takes Morbius to Shriek, assuming he'd help her, which makes no sense. But I guess maybe Morbius would bring out the best in her because she's his wife, but then she mind controls Morbius to fight Spider-Man again. And in this boss fight, you have to fight both of them at the same time and open the window so the sunlight hits Morbius so you can take him out. And once he's done, you have to follow Shriek into the kind of deeper caves of this industrial looking base that she kind of cobbled together with her henchmen. And then once you get there, you see a hallucination of Mary Jane, and Peter kind of freaks out thinking she's getting hurt because she's saying she's getting hurt. And then he runs through the cave, and it's super trippy and well done, despite the fact that the graphics did not hold up in this area specifically. And then Shriek tricks you into seeing Harry Osborn, Jonah Jameson, Eddie Brock, Dr. Connors, and they're all kind of, and Harry Osborn, who I probably already said, and they're all taunting you on your failures, and you have to fight them. But really, at some point, you can kind of break the illusion. But the stuff they say is super solid dialogue, and you can kind of feel the guilt that Peter has. And she can also only be defeated with the black suit, Shriek. But the problem is she uses her sonic scream to rip it off because the symbiote hates noises. So you have to kind of beat her up before she can do the screaming animation, which is a strategy I recently learned kind of beats her. So after you beat her, Morbius's arc is kind of closed up in a solid fashion, and basically they get to not really live happily ever after. I'm curious to see if the other Spider-Man games for the Wii and the other consoles would have continued this story arc. I would have liked to have seen it, or at least given it a conclusion, but we'll never really know. But that was easily, like, I already filled up like 20 minutes with just talking about Shriek and Morbius. Then we get on to Eddie Brock posing as Spider-Man, which this mission was way better than the 360 version because Eddie actually dresses up like Spider-Man and you kind of beat him up. And they think Spider-Man's bad because Eddie frames him, and then you beat him up and then kind of ruin Eddie's day, kind of like in the movie. But I think it's more well done here because Peter's not randomly aggressive. And then we get to Sandman. And Sandman's boss here is, I'd say, equal for these versions. Both versions are great, but this one is better in the way that the suit takes over Spider-Man finally. You cannot take it off. And it really shows how addicted he is to it, because at first he's not going to use it because the police are kind of suspicious of his new suit, making him more aggressive and more powerful. But finally, he defeats Sandman, but he can't take the black suit off. And what's annoying about this game is I didn't realize there's no context as to why Spider-Man is upset with Sandman. In the 360 version, he's mad at him. In this one, he's not. He doesn't know that he killed Uncle Ben. That was completely removed. So in here, it's fine. It doesn't matter if he killed him or not. He's just kind of some random thug who you can't damage without the black suit, but the game doesn't let you put it on until Peter decides that he has to use the suit, and then you can't take it off. And you hear him being like, oh crap, I can't take this off. I gotta get it off. So he defeats Sandman. We go through the whole black suit spiel, and Then he removes it because he gets mad at Mary Jane, and all that stuff happens. And then we get to Venom. This boss fight is the hardest one in the game, simply because he can dodge every single hit that you try to, get on him. And you have to go above him with a dodge so you can hit him from behind when he's distracted. But the problem is, sometimes he'll immediately turn around and take you out. And then Harry has to kind of shoot him up and slash him with his blade so you can kill him. And there's a time limit. And if you run out, the car falls and Mary Jane dies. And you fail the mission. So it's super hard. The second part is way easier, and the Sandman parts are okay because they had to put Sandman in it for the movie. And Harry dies, and Peter's so emotionless. He's like, Harry. He doesn't even care that he died. At least in the console version, I mean the 360 version, I keep saying it like that, but it was more better. That's why I kept calling it the console version, graphically at least. But Peter just kind of doesn't care that Harry's dead. You finish Venom off in a final showdown. As the music kind of gets worse to me, it turns into a techno song for the second part of the fight with Venom when you're finally able to beat him. And as a kid, I remember dying so many times to Venom in both of them, and I was so happy that I beat him. I was so happy. I honestly felt like I grew up a little playing this game in some ways because it really forced me to push myself and just kind of strategize and take the guy down. And it's because I didn't use any upgrades and sucked at the combat, so I just relied on the black suit to kind of carry me. And when that's taken away from you, even when you're older and actually know how to play the game correctly, it's still kind of hard without the black suit. Like, they really make you like it, and then they rip it away from you. Understandably for the story purposes, but it would have been nice to unlock it without having to collect 100 emblems that are hidden in the city, which is ridiculous. You have to go around the open world looking for them, which makes no sense to me. But that's how it is sometimes with game design. We get a cool final swing, which was a trend in each movie where we'd see Spider-Man swing off into the distance at the ending and kind of narrate. In this one, we get that again, but it's probably my favorite swing, and I think it's better than the movies to me here. Spider-Man kind of reminisces about Uncle Ben, the people that died, and it's super cool. It's super inspiring. The music is booming. He's webbing up. He's saying, I'll always be your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and that's how he ends it. He says that's the best way he can honor the people he loves, like Uncle Ben. And that's what's cool about it. You can kind of feel the struggle Spider-Man is having in this, more so than in the movie to me, because he's not just giving into the suit, he's fighting it. He wants to use both, to balance both, and it would have been cool if they would have changed the plot so he could balance both, and that would also make the boss fights much less harder in terms of the symbiote always being there. Plus the atmosphere I was talking about with the whole green sky and overcast clouds and darker colors and lighting and just the whole atmosphere of the city just give off this kind of darkness that the suit itself shows, where it feels like the city itself is representing the struggle with the suit, because sometimes it's very like sunny and there's a little more color, but sometimes it's like super dark. The trees are dead. The sky's got an eerie green, foggy look to it. And it all melds together in a way that just feels like Peter's struggle with the suit is being represented in the world itself and the music too. The music is more tense as the game goes on. It's still heroic, but you can kind of hear a struggle in it. You get this feeling of power at the same time because the suit is so strong as the music just soars. It's really amazing to me, that atmosphere. And I don't think any other Spider Man game has pulled it off as well as this one. Personally. Like, nothing ever meshes the story with the world itself. Web of Shadows kinda did. But I just feel like it was kind of, hey, here's a symbiote invasion. And it worked for that game, but this felt more. It's weird. It felt more desperate to me. It was more subtle. And I usually don't talk about, like, the world kind of reflecting it. And Web of Shadows lied. I think on the back of the cover it talked about how things could change or something. Or YouTubers talked about the world changing because you use the black suit, and that's not true. That's false advertising. It would have been a genius idea where if you use the black suit, things get worse. I'd still keep the final part where everything gets worse either way, but maybe I'd have an after game segment where you can go back to that like dark, dingy symbiote world if you use the suit enough, or if you make bad choices with it. At least you can still use the suit, but if you just start causing chaos, then everything falls apart and the symbiote enemies come back again. That's how I would do it, which is how this game does it. It's so much better in that area. But we basically covered everything for this game. In addition to the podcast, I'm going to upload this regularly on Mondays so I can have content on this channel and just talk about games I enjoyed as a kid. The podcast is super awesome, but it's more about general gaming. It's not just about nostalgia and old games. Plus, there's some games that, my co-host hasn't experienced, so I don't really want to bring them up on the podcast just kind of unprompted. It really wouldn't fit the theme or the mood. It's more about games we both played, and that's why I like that one. I gotta bounce off of him. This one's more unedited and unscripted, but I finally decided to go for an unscripted series I can also do on my own on the side, because I'm also developing a video game which has significantly slowed down uploading schedules. But this will be the constant series that's going to remain. Topical videos will kind of slow down. I'm going to become less scripted because I'm pouring all that kind of attention into my game. That doesn't mean you won't see them again, but they're going to become less common, so that's probably going to be the change. Nostalgic games, though, this is the first episode. I'm happy I was able to do it, and I hope that it becomes a valued and enjoyable portion of the channel that you guys can kind of relate to if you really kind of enjoy old games as much as I do, because I feel like they don't get enough love, and the newer, more next-gen counterparts to me just are kind of more boring and have so much less content or just worse stories. But this is the series, and I hope you like it. I will see you on Monday with another episode.